Hey guys, so I had a great time at the Adam Silvera book launch. It was super fun. I also got to meet Emma from Emma Books and Michael from Michael Book Line, and they were super sweet, and I had a great time meeting them and chatting with them a little bit. So today I am at Barnes & Noble in Union Square picking up my copy of Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo for a signing tonight, and the discussion with Daniel Jose Older, who I'm also a huge fan of, so I'm really excited about that, and I will vlog that for you as well.
Wonder Woman Warbringer. Make sure you guys read it. We're super excited. And this! Yay!
Best-selling author of Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, and the Shadow and Bone trilogy. She is the first author in the DC Icon series, where the DC Comics superhero icons are written by megastar young adult authors. The highly anticipated, entirely new coming-of-age story, Wonder Woman Warbringer, follows one of the world's greatest heroes. But first, she is Diana, Princess of the Amazons, and her fight is just beginning. Joining Leigh in conversation tonight is the New York Times bestselling author of Shadowshaper, Daniel Jose Older. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Leigh Bardugo and Daniel Jose Older.
Hello, friend.
What's up, everybody? How's it going? How are you?
I'm good.
All right, we're done.
And good night.
Do we have Grishaverse fans in the house?
I'm a Shadowshaper fan.
Oh. Yeah. Six of Crows fans in the house. Do we have Wonder Woman fans? Introverts, make some noise! Good, that was impressive. That usually doesn't work.
Full of book lovers, you're like, yes, that's me!
Quiet nerds who never get to be loud, make some noise! People who perform being extroverted but really aren't, make some noise! Whew, me too.
This is exciting.
I know.
I feel like it's all downhill from here.
Now let's have a really dry conversation. No. So, welcome.
Hello.
I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited. We've never actually done an event together, which is weird.
But every time we talk, it's like an event. That's actually true. I'm not even joking.
We'll be on the phone and be like, let's go to Q&A.
Seriously, we say smart things to each other.
We do. But now we've jinxed each other. Now the rest of this event will just...
So how's it going?
Fantastic.
This is going to be terrible. Anyway, first of all, I love the book. And I'm really not just saying that. I'm really not. I mean, I read it, so I have to.
Understand that when I gave Daniel this book, the first thing he said to me when he was giving me notes was, I'm not really into superheroes. That's probably the first thing you should know.
I knew you were going to tell them that story, so I braced myself for it.
Yes.
And it's true. Unless the superheroes have lightsabers, I'm just not interested. But I love this book. And I really mean that. It was really, really good, which didn't surprise me, because it's you.
And I was shocked.
I was appalled. But I kind of just want to be like, how'd you do that? That seems like a smart question, right? No, wait, I'll phrase it better. First of all, I really do want to know, for personal and professional reasons, which I can't speak to, what was it like and how did you write in someone else's world? Because one of my favorite things about your writing is the world building. So suddenly you're somewhere totally new, someone else's creation that's been going on for decades. How did you do that?
Well, I think it would be different if it was one person's creation, but Wonder Woman has over 50 years of canon, and a lot of different people have put their mark on her story, and there are a lot of different versions of Themyscira in particular, and her origin story, and the Amazon's origin story. So I kind of took what resonated with me, and I just put the rest in the airlock, and was like, I'm gonna leave that behind, you know?
Steve.
That's right. Yeah, Steve Trevor went to the airlock, so.
It's about time. Hey.
Have fun. Sorry, Chris Pine. He's doing great.
Keep Chris and get rid of Steve. I feel.
Yeah.
I mean,
he could have a new job. Actually, not in my book. He couldn't.
No. That's fine.
That's fine.
Anyway, so you have but you have all this material. You're sorting through it. You're finding some stuff you like, some stuff you don't.
Yeah. I mean, do people know the thing that you're doing?
The what?
The thing that you're.
No. Sorry. If you come to Comic-Con, you'll find out.
That's what we call marketing. Yeah, I mean, I had written this essay for this book, Last Night a Superhero Saved My Life, and it was all about Wonder Woman and falling in love with Wonder Woman when I was a kid, and falling out of love with Wonder Woman when I hit puberty, and yeah, I mean, when you're like, oh, gravity, that's a thing, physics, this isn't gonna happen. And then falling back in love with her, you know how that is.
I don't.
And sort of coming to terms with how she can be such a feminist icon and still, you know, fight for your rights in her satin tights. She's literally wearing bustier and spangled panties, and yet she's a stone cold badass. So making that work for myself as an adult. So I had done this deep dive into Wonder Woman lore, not just in terms of the canon that existed, but the cultural impact she's had and the way people have talked about her. And I even talked to cosplayers, and then I ended up using like a fraction of that because that's what research is. But yeah, so I already sort of knew the kind of story I wanted to tell, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was secretly being prepared for my future destiny, because then Random House called and was like, want to write a superhero book? And I was like, funny you should ask. Yeah, it was kind of like fate.
That's kind of awesome. But then character-wise, right? Because one of the things I struggle, I'll say nicely, with superhero stuff is that sometimes, usually, there's not a lot of character, right? Like, Superman, I know, I'm about to get trashed. Sorry, y'all. Superman is just a nice dude. Like, he's flawed, but he's like too nice or whatever. That's boring. I mean,
Daniel. Superman is one of the great immigrant origin stories. So, and I also think we have a bad... They both get the job done. There is a Hamilton reference in Wonder Woman.
Of course.
And it's really on the nose, so you don't have to go looking for it. Yeah, I mean, yes, Superman is a particularly hard character to write. Sorry, Matt Delapena writing Superman, so good luck, fella.
Not me. People have mistaken us for each other and asked me that question. So, being Latino in publishing. No response to that except, God, I hope I never do that. Superman and Wonder Woman are both not necessarily lawful characters, but they are good characters, and I think that's the interesting sort of point of distinction, is somebody who is maybe charged with upholding a given law or a given code, and then they find that their own personal code of ethics diverges from that. And that's sort of the entry point for me into Diana's character. And I think it's also in some ways closer to what a lot of us, the way we'd like to live, right? Like, we want to be the kind of person when we see injustice who's actually going to speak up about it, even if we are not always that person. And then you have Batman, who broods a lot. A lot of brooding. I feel attacked.
But there's a reason these stories resonate again and again, and I don't think it's just a question of having powers, because there's so many characters with powers, and there's a reason that these are the stories that come back to us again and again.
That's true.
So.
Well, what I love about your Wonder Woman and Diana is that she feels so real and human, and that she struggles. And we see her like go through that conflict of like her society and then doing what's right, and they're not always the same thing, which I guess is.
And I mean, let's be honest. Sierra is a superhero too. Like, she has a superhero.
Yeah.
She may not be wearing a cape, although book 3 just a suggestion.
Wow. Spoiler alert.
I'm just saying. But it's the same thing. It's about coming into.
Yeah.
It's about deciding who you are in the world once you realize that you don't necessarily have to take all of the world's crap.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's real. So, having established that your method of trying to work within this world that was already set, you also are coming in line with that. You're dealing with well-trod territory, right? Like, there's an origin story aspect to this, and Lord knows how many times do you ever see Bruce Wayne's parents get killed, right?
So many times.
Over
Poor
and over.
Bruce.
I will kill them myself because I'm tired of seeing that. Anyway, not really.
Slow-mo doesn't help. Slow-mo doesn't help.
So how did you strategically come into that thinking, like, how am I going to do this differently?
Well, in terms of structure, I mean, the origin story I hewed to, except instead of Steve, Diana meets a girl named Aaliyah from New York. And as it turns out, that changes a lot about the story. And then the quest that they have to go on together is a very different one. So that was one shift, but the origin story structure of Aaliyah crashing off the shores of the Mascara is one we'll all recognize. For me, one of the most compelling things, though, was getting to take on the Amazons, because there are so many versions of the island, and they're all spectacularly weird. And so trying to find a way to ground that was, to me, the kind of world building we do most. Where you're taking something fantastical and you're trying to make the illusion feel so real that you could find it plausible. And, the Amazons in a lot of the versions of Wonder Woman canon are kind of this, like, ancient, super strong group of ladies who have lived completely out of time and also represent this kind of monolithic culture. So I thought, well, what if every woman or girl who died heroically in battle, if she cried out to a goddess in her last moment, any goddess anywhere in the world, would come to the island, and that changed everything. Because then you actually have a group of women who come from different places and they've dedicated their lives to defending and pursuing peace. And that to me was more exciting than a bunch of super strong ladies who maybe run an Etsy shop. I don't know what they do.
I mean, that's real, and I love that about the book, and that also brings me to my next question perfectly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a diverse-ass book.
Thank you.
And I can say that, right?
I wish that had been a blurb.
Next time.
It's not too late.
I'm gonna blur my own book with that. Diverse-ass book. I said that shit.
Patterson, do it.
But unlike so many people, I feel you really get the different characters right.
Thank you.
Unlike everybody. Because we see diversity done wrong so much, like most of the time. So, I feel like...
This is where you see the white lady author be like,
so as
I begin to sweat.
I'm going to ask you the question that writers of color get every time we do a panel, which is, how do you write the other? So, it's a good question. But, I mean, we always get it, but y'all don't get it as much. So how did you go about your process of, doing it and doing it respectfully? Besides asking me.
Yeah, I mean, that helps. I have a great critique partner. Look, I knew that when I approached this story, I feel like especially if you're handling an iconic character, then you have a responsibility to try to make that story as inclusive as possible. And I mean, it's Wonder Woman. Everybody should get to be in Wonder Woman. And there were certain things I knew I wanted to address, and I also felt like, I think what people don't realize is once they make a decision in terms of diversity, it should impact the rest of the story. Right. She meets a black girl from New York, so she's gonna have a different experience than if she met a white guy from London or America, or Steve's from America, he's American. Very American, so American.
Randomly.
But that also, I mean, it can't just be like, and then you have to deal with all of that, and that after I gave you the first draft and I sort of went through this, I knew there were problems with it, you knew there were problems with it, and there were things that I really had to wrestle with. And I think the way I try to approach is first do no harm. Is the premise of the story flawed? Am I going into this with a situation where I came at this from a dishonest place, or from maybe a well-meaning place but a crappy one, which is, I think, the most painful thing. And I think the other thing is never start thinking of yourself as a good guy. white people really want to be good guys. We really do. Like, we want to be like, yes, everybody wants to like pat on the back. You're one of the good ones.
Is that what that is?
Give me the cookies. And I think as soon as you start thinking of yourself that way,
Right.
you do something dumb and potentially really harmful. So.
They asked Juno Diaz how he writes women characters so well, and he was like, I know that I suck at it. And that's like the first thing. He goes in with like, that's
Yeah.
A number one.
Yeah.
You can't do it well.
Also, like, okay, this is maybe dangerous, so nobody tweet it. But like, sensitivity readers are great. But also, if you're choosing to write a story, let's say about a Jewish disabled girl, like me, and you've never met a Jewish person or a disabled person, or you don't have any friends who are, like, maybe you should ask yourself why you're choosing to write that story. One of the reasons I was able to work through, I hope successfully in this book, some of the issues that came up was because I have friends who are gonna have a long conversation with me and be like, you're being a jackass, which is what you need to hear. You need somebody to have a conversation with you, and then you need to get off the phone and then 2 days later call them back and be like, okay, I think I have an idea. What do you think about this? You know, Aaliyah is biracial, and I have 2 best friends who are a biracial couple who had a baby last year and have had to grapple with a lot of big stuff. And that they were the people who sort of cracked open the story for me. So, yeah. I mean, you helped too.
No. Honestly, the draft you gave me didn't have major problems. Like
It had one major problem.
We jiggled some stuff, but it wasn't like There was.
It wasn't, except I got off the phone with him and was like, oh God.
From here, it didn't, you know.
You've never experienced white panic. You don't know.
You got it. I mean,
It's a condition, yeah.
but even that, I mean, you had to work on stuff, but it wasn't, even in the
so much
state it
trouble
was.
from this night.
This is fun. I hope someone's filming this. Well, let's change courses momentarily.
Okay.
You're putting out a book of short stories.
Yes, in this month.
Language of Thorns. Give it up. Wait, this month?
Yeah, in like 2 weeks, September 29th.
That's
I don't-
ridiculous.
No kidding.
Come on.
First word I was
Don't
gonna
your people
say.
quote me?
No. Yeah, it's a little bit nuts to have 2 books out in the space of a month, but it's the way it worked out, and I don't know, there's a through line, I think.
Really? Between Wonder Woman and Language of Thorns?
Weirdly, yes.
Do go on. Proceed.
Theory. Yeah, because every time you do a like the stories in Language of Thorns, some of them are retellings, and some of them just take their inspiration from earlier fairy tales, and some will be recognizable. There's a story that's very recognizable as The Little Mermaid, but considerably more bloodthirsty. What's that?
It's all in the Grishaverse.
It's all in the Grishaverse, but you don't ever have to have read a Grisha book to read it. These are the stories my characters would have heard growing up. So monsters and mermaids and dark magic in the woods and all that kind of stuff that I love. And it is beautifully illustrated by Sarah Kippen in this spectacular way where the art changes on every page. But the thing I realized was, you know, when you create these stories, because you're dealing with archetypes, you're in conversation with everything that came before. In the same way that when we work with a story or in a universe that already existed, you're in conversation with all the stuff that happened before that. So people are bringing different expectations that you get to play with the characters. And I think that's actually pretty fun.
That's really cool. So you're almost thinking in terms of counter-narrative, but not quite?
Oh yes.
Like twisted, tweaked?
Many twists.
Oh dear.
Oh yes.
Difference between writing short stories and writing novels? First of all, you write fat novels. I say that with love, and with both an F and a PH. Like, they're great in many ways. They heavy as hell. You know, I just almost dropped an F-bomb and I didn't. Really should just get a cookie for that. Difference between writing short stories and
I have no cookies to spare. I think short stories are much harder than writing novels.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I feel like you write novellas. You do
I write
this
short stories
frequently and fast.
Hey.
Hey. Yeah, I mean, I think...
What's going on? I think we've entered an alternate reality.
I don't know. We both became the Fonz. So this is what I was afraid would happen.
I knew this was going to happen.
I totally forgot what I was saying.
Short stories.
Short stories. Yeah, well, okay. I will tell you. I think that they're harder because we have to do more in less space. Especially, there's a story in it that was basically novella length, where there's a whole new magical system and a lot of new world building. You have much shorter space. I think the reader expectations of sort of payoff for what you're doing occur in this really sort of finite way. And I also feel like I became a better writer I think I'm a very different writer now than when I wrote Shadow and Bone. I think part of that was writing short stories because it forces you to work on a sentence level. So you really can hone in on prose and the demands of it in the same way, in a poem, or I used to write movie trailers, exactly the same. So it's true, and you're welcome. But that I think that need to make every word count made me level up in terms of prose. At least I hope it did, because I feel different about the prose that I write now.
In a town.
Without justice.
Where nothing would ever be the same.
I was the only woman on staff, so I never got to write In a World Without Justice. I wrote, Jenny was a girl who couldn't catch a break. But one day, sometimes you gotta fall in love to fall out of whatever.
Did you do it in that voice when you were
Always.
writing?
Always.
Which actually brings me to the next question, which I hadn't even thought I was going to ask. But do you read out loud when you're writing?
Oh, yeah. Do you?
Yeah, I have to. Otherwise, I'll die.
I don't do it. Like a shark that stops swimming?
Yes. Someone shot my head off mid-sentence.
I'm not sure that's what happens when a shark stops swimming, but okay. They're just decapitated instantly. The ocean is a dangerous place. I don't know.
Anyway, you read out loud.
I read out loud when I get into the later drafts. It's a way for me to make sure that the diction is working and the rhythm is working. It's a way to catch mistakes. And when something's really working, I know because I start falling into the voices, and especially with something with multiple POV where that shifts.
Right.
Everybody should sound differently right off the page. So, yeah.
Right. Do you have any advice for young writers?
Why young writers, Daniel?
Do you have any advice for old writers? Wait, what are you trying to say?
Take your vitamin D.
God.
My advice, look, I didn't write my first book till I was 35, so I always bristle.
That's young.
Yeah, sure, okay. But I'm immortal, like an Amazon, but without the cardio. So I find that the advice applies to everybody, which is finish a draft, write a terrible, awful, messy first draft.
Yes.
Understand that this process is about learning your process. I didn't know I was an outliner. You're an outliner too, right?
No, my God. I'm outlining right now because I'm writing someone else's universe and it's driving me mad.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I don't outline at all.
I did not know that.
Really? I thought we talked about this. I hate outlining.
I don't even know you anymore.
I feel about outlining the way I feel about superheroes.
Which is better now. Yeah, I am definitely an outliner. I need to know where I'm going. I need that safety net. And that sort of gives me a place if I lose momentum to jump to. And I don't know, that's the way I build my plots. And I had to learn that about myself because I never knew that. And so it was really hard for me to finish a book. So yeah, learn your process. And this is why I say it's not just for young writers. There's no expiration date on your talent. Okay? We live in a culture that fetishizes youth and also that fetishizes the idea of the young genius. We don't care about aspiring, we only care once you've arrived. But aspiring is really powerful, and but I think embracing that and the fact that you're making art with no one watching is one of the most badass things you can do.
That's real. That's real. I just felt like me on that for a second. That's so real. Thank you. Fix your life. Two things. Walter Mosley didn't start writing until he was 40, and he has 50 books out. That dude is ridiculous.
So slow.
That was not the moral of the story.
That's what I took away from it.
He's badass, and it's never too late, and all that. Amen. You know what I realized? Why I don't like outlining? Because I'm doing it right now. I feel really lost right now because I outlined, and now I'm just filling in that outline, so I have no sense, internally of what's happening emotionally in the story because I already made all those decisions. When I don't outline, like a normal person, no, I'm just kidding. Like me. No, most people outline, I think. like a normal process for me when I don't outline and I'm just finding my way through as I write, I feel like I can gauge like, okay, what do I want to know as a reader right now, and then kind of go that direction.
Well, I think.
But I'm lost right now.
I mean, I think there has to be a balance between those two things. It's not like I work out every beat because then all the mystery and excitement would leak out of the story.
Maybe that was my problem.
Hey.
Shit.
Make a nice playlist there. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about knowing the big moments that I can work backwards from, especially because so much of fantasy is about release of information, and especially when you're writing like a heist book, so much of it is about like the things that happen is the setup for those things and how much information you're handing out, so you don't end up at the end of the story with somebody like walking on stage and being like, let me tell you all the things I just did that you didn't see me do, which is not, I think, as satisfying. Sure. So that for me is I mean, that you've got to find a balance between that sort of spontaneity. And I will say too, my first drafts are usually excruciating because it feels like an awkward first date. Like, it's like the characters haven't settled in, and so you're basically like, what kind of music do you like? Do you have any brothers or sisters? It's this
That's a good metaphor.
weird, awkward, awful thing that you have to get through, and then finally those characters start locking in, and you're like, oh, I actually want to spend time with you, you know?
Can't relate. No, that's a really good metaphor.
All my first dates are magic.
I'm gonna use that now. I'm totally stealing that.
You have to give me $1 every time you do.
Should we take questions?
Yeah, people have them.
I think people are going to.
Does anybody have a question? No? Yes. Over there. There, everyone. You can just shout.
Maybe back. Yeah.
Hi, just shout out to both of you. I met you before in the past, and you're both great people, and thank you for writing great books.
We fooled her!
Evil planet full of bats. Wow.
And I keep asking this to every writer I know about writing, since I hope to do some writing in the future, but every time I sit down it feels so awful. Awful, because I keep getting blocked and I keep feeling like I'm not writing anything good. Like, how do you push yourself past that?
Okay, here's the thing, right? When we go to the movies, what do we see when we see a writer on screen or a painter or any kind of artist? We see somebody get the idea, and then they write. And or they have a break up, and then they cry, and they write, and at the end of that, they have the thing, and they send it off to New York where it's magically published, and that's how I thought books got made for a long time. But I think one thing that I really had to do in order to be able to, because I was in the exact same position where I would start to write and I'd be like, this is terrible. And the truth is, it is terrible. First drafts are terrible. Your first draft is going to be terrible. None of the books on these shelves are first drafts though. Or second drafts, or third drafts, or fourth drafts. They've been through multiple revisions. They've been professionally edited. They didn't start out this way. Nobody writes this magical first draft, so don't compare yourself to the things you love. Your problem is you have good taste, right? But it's really important not to let that taste get in the way of those early steps that you never see and that we never see in media, and to understand that even if this is your calling and the thing you were meant to do, there's going to be days you feel like a genius, the best days, and it feels like a calling, and then there are going to be days where it feels like a job you're really bad at, and being okay with those days and comfortable with that discomfort, I think, is what took me from being somebody who wanted to be a writer to being a writer.
Yeah, and I would add to that exactly, and just, you know, writing really does begin with forgiveness, and I wrote an essay titled that a couple years ago, and it's something I try to remind myself of constantly, because I always forget it, and I always tell my students that, and then they forget it, and then telling them reminds me. But there's so many voices in this world telling you that you shouldn't write, or that you should feel shame instead of writing, or while you write, or for writing, or that you're not good enough, or whatever. There's just a million ways to tap into that and believe it. An Eisner said shame is the lie you believe about yourself. And that shit is real, and that will stop you from writing. Much quicker than skipping a day or a month or even a couple of years of writing. That won't stop you. What you have to do is sit down and forgive yourself for not writing yesterday or the day before, or for years even, and then allow yourself to just start new and fresh. Because that's how you'll write better, and that's how you'll write at all, and get the words on the page, and that's what matters, is that you sit down and write, with love and forgiveness instead of shame and fear.
If you have the chance to see Daniel teach or take one of his classes, do it. Like, just absolutely. No, I got to see you do a presentation at seminar, and it blew my mind. Like, it's an incredible teacher, incredible writer. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, cell phone.
Totally agrees.
Wait, on top of that, if you're around on Monday, I'm releasing a book at Housing Works. Shadowhouse Fall. It's about Shadowshaper.
Guys, who's read Shadowshaper? All right.
Hey.
Everybody else, read Shadowshaper. Because then you can read Shadowhouse Fall. I like Shadowshaper very, very, very much. But Shadowhouse Fall,
Better.
wow. It's like mind-blowingly. I read it in an airport, and I was sitting there like I was writing you notes, and the artist like, why?
That is the most important notes for you. Yes.
I have used a lot of exclamation points in all caps. but and the people in the airport were like, what's happening to them? She typing, but it's so good. It's one of the best fantasies I've read in a very long time.
Shit.
So good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, jeez.
You're gonna be
Anyway,
insufferable.
questions?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I just finished my young adult novel. Thank you.
We're a recovering group. My name's Leigh and I'm a young adult author.
I wrote it 2 years before Trump was elected. And then I started rewriting it after he was elected. And I didn't realize until recently of how much what's happened in our country really came through in the novel. And it's a fantasy novel. I didn't really expect that. So I feel like the both of you are voices for the voiceless. I really feel like, I don't want to get choked up. My mom, I'm first generation American, and I'm Cuban. I don't look it. I know I look white.
I feel you.
And what's happened over the weekend about the Dreamers, and that you both write diverse characters, whether they're handicapped, people of color. Do you feel with what's happening politically in our country that it's starting to change what type of stories you want to tell and to give hope to not just the young adults, but even the adults who are going through and are being stigmatized or their rights are being given away? Do you feel like that's shaping your writing now?
No, for me.
It's a heavy one.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm also a first generation. My mom is Cuban. It's great to hear your voice out there, and I'm really happy you finished the book. To answer your question, everything is more right now, but nothing is new. And that's been a lot of my guiding principle, both for survival and for strategy and thriving even. I started in writing and entered into publishing in like 2009 and 2012. My first book came out, but I started writing in 2009. And back then I was like, I'm writing to fuck shit up. Because publishing is real white and racist, and there's a lot of problems, so we need to change
You're
that.
welcome!
So I entered into with that mandate, you know what I mean? So this has been like the work for me and for a lot of the writers I know for a long, long time. Now it's more urgent, and now there's more people being like, I feel like in November of last year, a lot of people that had spent a lot of time being like, what are you talking about, white supremacy? You're so silly. And then we're like, what is that? What is that thing? And we're sitting here like, motherfucker, we told you. Did you not hear me? Which is to say, like, it's ratcheted up a lot. And so, yes, there's an urgency around it, but strategically, like, we're here doing our job, doing it more, yes, giving hope, yes, calling out names who are out of line. That's always been true. The change has been needed for a long, long time. And I think the change is happening particularly because mostly women of color writers stepped up and put their names on the line a couple years ago and held that momentum to make this moment be what it is, meaning the moment where you can see, a lot more different color faces on books than we could 5 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
we have a long way to go, but we've come a long way, and that's because of the hard work of writers. The writers who had the most on the line in the first place were the ones who once again stood up and said, we're done with this shit. So that's an exciting thing. It means that, you know, we have a movement that's working hard and been working hard, and we weren't really caught off guard, even if it felt like it. Emotionally, it does feel like it. Every day I read the news and I have to swim back to the surface. But we also have to recognize that this is work that's been going on for centuries, both to target us and for our survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, I think the job of white writers right now is just actually to boost other voices. Like, when people say, wow, I really appreciated the diversity in your book, I take that as a reminder to recommend a book by an author of color, or another disabled author, or an LGBT author, or whomever. Like, that's your opportunity. It's just like a little, like, ring a bell and remember that that's something you should be doing. And I'm lucky enough to have a larger platform now and to get to recommend books, you know, but what are you reading, you know, and that kind of thing. And like, so those are opportunities to boost voices that maybe haven't had the backing they've had before. And at least for me, like, I feel like I've actually learned a lot from just being on social media the last few years. Like, I know Twitter is a crap show sometimes, and it sometimes can feel like a real nasty place, but I also feel like I'm a different writer because of some of the people I follow and their blogs and just paying attention a little more, so, yeah.
Me too.
You don't have to clap for me.
Hi, I love your books. I had a question about writing. I know all the authors have deadlines, but when do you know that's like, this is ready? Like, I'm ready to put this out there, and you're never ready. And
It depends what sign you are.
And in books you already published, what would you change it? Would be like huge.
I don't reread my books. I do not reread my books. I have never reread my books. I cannot do it. I find it excruciating. All I can think of is all of the changes I would make. There are, you know, occasionally scenes where I'm like, I did a good job. But there are plenty of things that I would fix. And like I said, I'm a different writer now than I was 5 years ago. I would be distressed if I was not. So I don't want to read things I wrote 5 years ago. It is sometimes a problem with continuity because you really do have to pay attention. Yeah, I mean, deadlines for me are very effective because I was one of those kids who always crammed before exams and wrote things at the last minute, and so that looming terror is very effective with me. And really, there's a switch that flips where you're like, wow, I actually need every minute of every day going forward if I'm going to get this done the way I want it to. For me, the hardest thing about deadlines is that I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time to make it good. You know, we all know when something's not working. We all know when it's not quite right. We know when it's good, but it could be great. And that's when, you know, there's a chapter in Crooked Kingdom that I probably rewrote I don't know how many times. So there were probably 30 different versions of it. And I feel like I got it right at the end. I haven't reread it, so I don't know. But that was the great terror for me, was I was going to run out of time to make it the book I wanted it to be. So I don't know if that's helpful in any way.
I would just caution against perfectionism. Perfection is dead, and so you don't want to strive for that because you'll be dead. But also, you'll get me hit by a shark. You stop swimming. Mixed metaphor for the but obviously you want to write the best you can, but that doesn't mean perfection, you know. And the other problem with, if you think, God forbid, you think you perfected it, then when you get edits, you're going to be like, why would you give me edits? It's a perfect book, you fool. You don't want to do that. So, you know, it's like, I think it's kind of a gut feeling though. Like, there's a certain moment where you're like, all right, look, I'm done. And it might, so you have to caution, like, you don't want it to be just because you're fed up.
But I also feel like there is a moment when you're like, I have reached this point that I cannot look at this any longer, and I need to give it to my editor, or I need to give it to a friend because I know that it's not brilliant, but it's ready for another set of eyes because I'm too close to it.
Yes.
You know? And so having great beta readers, great critique partners is essential.
And learning when to trust your gut. I mean, that's like, I really like your advice, and this is also what I tell, you know, similar thing when people ask me that question, is that you have to learn your process. which means you have to learn how to be introspective about process. Like I always recommend keeping a journal if you're a writer, just of your process, of what worked, what didn't work, how you feel it, how much coffee you had, what song you listen to, whatever. Like just so you can start to track, like, okay, that really didn't work. I don't write well at 3 a.m. Whatever, and then you learn, same thing, like then you also learn to trust your gut. Okay, this worked for me, or I feel like this is done.
Right.
Let me go get a cookie. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've been a fan of your books for a lot of years, and I'm a Jewish lesbian, and I was wondering if your faith has influenced your writing, your characters, your world building at all.
I don't consider myself a Jew in terms of faith. I do consider myself a Jew in terms of culture, largely because the world considers me a Jew. There's a lot of people around who consider me a Jew and don't like it. It influences, I think it influenced the Grisha trilogy a lot, actually. The Shadow and Bone trilogy, we're calling it now. Rebrand. I think it influenced that a lot. Like there was an influence on the way that, the idea for the Grisha army came from the idea of the World War II brain trust that happened essentially because Jews got kicked out of so many countries. But I also think it's a little bit peculiar. There's, people don't think about diaspora as much when they think about ownership of culture. And I literally the joke in my family was we've been kicked out of everywhere. Spain on one side, Russia and Lithuania on the other side. And that can be very painful to feel like you don't have something that you're allowed to have access to. So I think that that's made me a lot more sort of aware of that particular kind of marginalization. But there's also like a lot of weirdness wrapped up with being Jewish and privilege and whiteness and all kinds of stuff. So I would be lying if I said I had completely parsed it for myself.
Diana.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, we have time for just about 2 more questions.
Hi.
Hi.
So mine isn't as particularly as heavy as everybody else's.
That's weird because it's intense in this room.
I like a balance.
What made you decide to go in the direction of Warbringer?
Meaning, like, why, like...
Why, what made you think of Aaliyah's story?
So, some of you, I don't know if any of you have read Warbringer yet. It's only been out, so a few people, okay. Yeah. We did, and we hated it. That's why we're here. Wanted to show you our 1-star Goodreads reviews. So, the story of Helen of Troy is one that sort of everybody knows from school or from mythology, and I think it's a perfect example of the way a story can be reduced. And this happens to women throughout history, where they just become one thing. And in Helen's case, she's either viewed as an adulteress or a kidnapping victim, but always as somebody who is just sort of the object of what a lot of men are doing. And I wanted to take apart that myth. It feels so essential to some of our ideas about women and myth. And I thought, well, what if Helen didn't cause a war because she's real purty? What if she caused a war because she has destruction in her blood? And as it turns out, one of the lesser known stories of her origins is not that she was the daughter of Leda, but that she was the daughter of Nemesis, who is the goddess of divine retribution, who is also known as the inescapable. And I really, really like that. So I'm a big fan of Nemesis, and that was really where Aaliyah's story started. Yeah. I still managed to make it heavy. See how I did that?
Hi. Over here.
Hi.
Corner. I'm such a big fan. So I read Warbringer and I really loved it. And you write and represent strong women, and you yourself are a strong woman. And I work in the tech field, and I'm like, I'm the only girl engineer in my entire workplace. And I just wanted to ask you, how do you like handle a situation where people think you don't know what you're doing, people think that you're not as smart as everyone else? How do you manage that?
Wow. This is hard, right? This is really hard because it's not just a question of being like, I'm gonna stand up in the face of tyranny. You have a job, you need to keep that job and pay the bills and do all those things, and those are very real And one of the ways that we actually rebel is by succeeding, okay? When we succeed, they get mad. That's why you see so many articles about YA and how YA is, it's trouble for the ladies and it's trouble for the children and won't somebody read the classics? They do that because they're afraid. When people start ruling the marketplace, when they start making money, when they start generating income and creating culture, then people freak out, right? So part of your job, I think, in terms of resistance is to just survive that workplace so that someday you're a boss and can bring on a lot more women and make sure that you have a team and a crew surrounding you who are going to support you. But I don't know, I used to work at Fox Network. And I'll never forget, I got called I just delivered this huge project, like this crazy website project, and I got called into the office of, I'm so tempted to say his name, and he said to me, and I thought I was getting called in for a raise and promotion, and he said, well, we know that that's what you want, but we just need to know that you can be a little sweeter. And at the time I was like, okay, got it. And then I went out that night, I went shopping for an outfit for the Christmas party, and I was in the dressing room, and I'd like to say that I gave him the double bird and ran out of there, but I didn't. I just took it in, and then I went, and I was standing in the dressing room trying on an outfit, and this Madonna song came on, and I started crying, and I was like, the glass ceiling is real! But guess what? Now I'm in a position where I get to hire women, I get to hire female artists, I get to hire people on to do design projects for me, I get to boost other writers, I get to do all of those things because I stuck with it and because I didn't let some little jackass at the Fox Network, who I really hope crashed his Porsche into a tree, keep me down. So I think that's, resist by surviving, resist by thriving.